On a remote Scottish island, 24-year-old Claire Leveque was found dead in a hot tub, and authorities suspect her boyfriend, 41-year-old Aren Pearson, brutally stabbed her. But Pearson's own account of how Claire died, it is as shocking as it may be hard to believe. And we are going to break it all down with international law attorney David Tafuri. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. You know, some stories, they start quietly. It's almost innocuous. It's like every other day. There is no sign of what is about to happen. And then when the story develops and you hear what happens, it settles in your chest. This is one of those stories. I want you to imagine this remote Scottish island. The winds whipping off the North Sea. There's a house that seems ordinary from the outside. But inside, the air, it is thick with tension. And by the end of that night, a life is gone. There's a family that's shattered, and the local community is stunned by this. And now, in a courtroom in Edinburgh, what one man has just told the jury is so shocking, you have to wonder, is the jury going to believe it? This is the tragic and twisting case that has unfolded over the past week at the High Court in Edinburgh. The story begins with 24-year-old Claire Leveque, originally from Westlock, Alberta in Canada, living and working in Edmonton. There she met Aren Pearson, a 41-year-old Canadian who also held British citizenship. This is according to the CBC. Now, at some point, they decided to leave Canada behind for a while and visit the Shetland Islands. This is a remote archipelago in northern Scotland, where the CBC reports Pearson had family connections, including his mother Hazel. Now, from the outside, their relationship might have looked adventurous, romantic, but behind closed doors, things were apparently far more complicated. According to reporting from the BBC and the Scottish Sun, court evidence showed that Claire and Aren drank heavily together, that they argued. At times, they were abusive towards one another. A neighbor, Catherine Jameson, testified that on January 2nd, 2024, a half-dressed, bleeding Pearson arrived at her door, erratic and distraught. He told her he had punched out his own teeth and claimed he had, quote, grenades. Now, that's not even the episode we're going to be talking about. The episode we're talking about right now is what happened February 11th. 2024. This is when Claire and Pearson were spending time at Pearson's mother's house in Sandnes at a property called Ringville. They had apparently planned to clean the hot tub and the adjoining shed, a place that they had spent a lot of time hanging out. This is according to Pearson's own statements in court, which we will get to. But as Pearson later described it, the afternoon turned into a horrible one. Alcohol was allegedly involved, arguments apparently escalated, and by the evening, police and emergency services were called to the scene. Why? Because Claire was found lifeless in the hot tub. The water apparently darkened, presumably by blood. Hazel Pearson, who has since passed away, according to the BBC, made an emergency call reporting that her son had said that he had killed Claire and was now stabbing himself. Pearson himself also reportedly spoke to the operator, reporting that he had driven his Porsche into the sea. The wreckage of that car was later recovered less than a kilometer from where Claire's body was found. This is per the CBC. Emergency crews, they found Pearson in distress, bleeding. Now, Pearson had been admitted to the Gilbert Bain Hospital in Lerwick after being detained in connection with Claire's death. According to reporting from the BBC, he made statements to doctors that would later be really analyzed in court. Statements that he allegedly stabbed himself in the neck and had been trying to, quote, get rid of Claire, a remark that he later insisted was taken out of context. Now, medical staff and a psychiatrist, they assessed him. They found no evidence of acute mental illness at the time that this happened, concluding he was fit to be interviewed. Investigators confirmed that Claire had suffered fatal stab wounds to her neck and chest. Forensic evidence also indicated blunt force trauma. Pearson's behavior after her death, including apparently sending messages to her father claiming she was, quote, in good health and that he had booked flights for her return, that became part of the evidence suggesting an attempt to obscure the truth, to cover up what had happened. In the end, Pearson faced a total of 7 charges: murder, assault, threatening and abusive behavior, attempted defeat of justice, and a series of acts designed to intimidate or mislead authorities. And despite the evidence, he pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. This trial began on October 7th in the High Court in Edinburgh before Judge Lord Arthurson. And over the following days, jurors would hear a combination of emergency call recordings, eyewitness testimony, medical reports, and Pearson's own account. and it culminated on the 5th day with the most personal and confiding version of events he has ever told. Now, we're going to get to all of that in a minute, but first, to help us break down what we are hearing so far, and there is a lot more to get into with this case, I want to bring on international law attorney David Tafuri. David, thank you so much for taking the time. Let's start here. Given that both Claire and Aren are Canadian citizens, this alleged crime occurred in Scotland. From a jurisdictional point of view, how is it determined? Could Canadian authorities theoretically get involved here, or is this all, part of Scottish territory?
It's certainly possible that Canadian authorities could get involved because especially the victim was Canadian. And however, in this case, it's unlikely because Scotland is going forward with the prosecution and the crime occurred there, as you mentioned. So a country like Canada in this instance would only get involved if Scotland refused to prosecute.
Right. And by the way, whenever we cover crimes of an international nature, it may be in a different jurisdiction, but some of the same themes, like we cover cases here in the States, are present, right? You have this alleged combination of alcohol, prior arguments, alleged abusive behavior. How does that factor in determining intent in a crime like this?
Well, those are going to be the facts that are going to be presented to the court for the court to decide if there was intent. And notably, Scotland has it's part of the United Kingdom, but it has a different legal system than England. And so they have a crime called culpable homicide, which means that you were engaged in crime, but you didn't necessarily intend to murder the person, but a murder happened as a result. So that might be something the defense is trying to go after here. And in order to do that, they would try to say alcohol and other things caused him to do this, and that there wasn't the requisite intent for murder.
Now, obviously, this is a story that we wanted to bring to you, and we can do that not only because of the amazing support that we get from you all, but also from our incredible sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm. This is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why they're so big? Because they win all the time. They have recovered over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In fact, in the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. Out in Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. There's another client in Pennsylvania that received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan, they make it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. When you look at some messages, though, I think that's interesting to think about that, right? So these alleged messages to Claire's father claiming that she was, quote, in good health. Statements about trying to get rid of Claire. How is that interpreted, both from an intent point of view and also context, maybe even a psychiatric evaluation?
Well, intent obviously depends upon what he was thinking and doing before the crime. So one of those things you mentioned, what he wrote about her after the crime to try to cover up the crime, that wouldn't go to his intent at the time of the alleged crime, but it might be evidence of another crime covering up a murder. The other stuff will go, any prior communications prior to the incident happening that showed that he might have been planning or thinking about killing her or thinking about even just harming her, that would go to intent.
And I want to get into this trial because it's something, okay? So day one set the stage with this emergency call and this horrifying discovery. And we start at the beginning. On this remote Shetland Islands, February 11th, 2024, according to court proceedings, 41-year-old Aren Pearson had just told his mother, Hazel, something that would soon set off a cascade of emergency responses, telling them that he had just killed Claire. Now, Pearson at some point took the phone himself, spoke directly to the operator saying, "Hello, hi, my name is Aren Pearson. I've just killed my girlfriend in the hot tub in the garage. I stabbed her about 40 times in the heart, stomach, face, neck, and back. I stabbed myself in the neck 4 times. Like I can't live the fact that I killed my stupid bleep of a girlfriend. She drank too much and bleeped me off. I drove my Porsche right into the ocean. It's gone. Yeah, she is dead. I definitely killed her to make sure I drowned her after I stabbed her several times and beat her the bleep up really badly. And I'm like, and jurors were presented with this raw, unflinching audio. Testimony from former police officer Dana Jameson, one of the first on the scene, painted a very grim picture because she told jurors that she saw Claire lifeless in the tub, floating on her back. Now, I will tell you, she said the water was black, okay, which Pearson's defense would later refer to simply as blood in the water. And by the end of the day, jurors heard the official cause of death to be from stab wounds to the neck and chest. David, this is just horrific for even me to describe. How does the defense get past an audio recording like that?
Yeah, I don't see how. As you mentioned earlier, these crimes frequently have some similarities, but this is the thing that makes this crime very different. It's very unusual for the killer to give such a long, detailed, and certain confession on essentially a 911 call right after the crime occurred. And, normally that's when they're trying to cover up the crime. Later, he tried to cover up the crime despite that confession. But this evidence is devastating. And apparently even the defendant's reaction to it when it was played in court demonstrated, how distraught he was over the fact that he did that.
Yeah, and the specificity of it, like allegedly talking about where the stab wounds were, how many times. The black water, I think it's important in trials, and sometimes we see this with crime scene reconstructions, we see this with site visits, but for the jurors to understand the crime scene, to understand the attack, that's important for them, both for the prosecution and the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to create an emotional response for the jurors, certainly, because the vision of it, a hot tub, dark black from blood, demonstrating just how much she bled as a result of the multiple stab wounds. It's such an odd place for a murder to happen because we think of hot tubs as, an intimate place where you would go with family and friends. And for this to happen in the hot tub and then to paint that picture of it afterwards is going to be really provocative for the jury.
Now let's talk about day 2 of this trial, okay? Day 2 of this trial began with a startling image from Aren Pearson's own mother, Hazel Pearson, who, by the way, has since passed away in May of this year. But jurors were able to hear what she told detectives from the night of February 11th, 2024. And she said that night, Aren looked unrecognizable, described him as looking zombie-like. And then she described the horrifying scene she witnessed, telling police, Aren walked into the kitchen and came back with a small black-handled kitchen knife. Aren stated to me he had hurt Claire. Claire was within the hot tub. The water was red with blood. Claire was covered with blood. She had severe injuries to her face. And Hazel then said she called police. One of the responding officers, PC Kevin Simpson, told the court that Pearson said, quote, "Murderers are to be killed. Put a bullet in me." Now, David, there is a difference between a random stranger making an account, an ex making an account, defendant's own mother. That's something that may be different. And I wonder, under Scottish evidentiary law, how is that statement treated? And is it, as far as you know, would it be corroborative evidence? Is it hearsay? It seems like it's going to be allowed in, even though she's no longer with us.
Yeah, under our rules, it would probably be allowed in because she's not available to testify to it. I'm not sure what the evidentiary rules in Scotland would provide for. It's also a very unusual part of this case. Normally, family members are helping the family member cover up a crime. In this case, she was really instrumental in revealing to the authorities that the crime occurred and the admissions that her son made. It sounds like she wanted her son to, fess up to what he did. And so she made sure that happened. And as you mentioned, tragically, she passed away, although it would have been an emotional experience for her to go through this trial.
Yeah. And Hazel reports Aren came back with a small black-handled kitchen knife. Okay. When you hear that description, they have to corroborate that, investigators, right? What do you think the forensic steps would be to confirm whether that was, in fact, the knife that was used on Claire?
Yeah, they're going to have to compare, the blood samples that they have on the knife and compare it to her blood and her DNA. That would be part of it. There could also be hair samples left on the knife as well, so that might also be a part of it. And then also you would look at the size of the knife and see if it matched the wounds that were on her. And there were so many stab wounds on her, you would likely be able to get a match if it were the knife.
When she describes Aren as zombie-like and unrecognizable, does that provide different context to this case for you?
I think it might if he is, seeking to claim he's not guilty by reason of insanity, or that he was under the influence and didn't know what he was doing. That might be supportive of one of those defenses. And, otherwise it's hard to understand what was happening there. Why did he go from this violent, flailing, stabbing murderer to a zombie? So it's kind of hard to, it paints a strange picture, but certainly you would think the defense would latch on to that to try to use that for their defense, but I'm not sure they have yet.
And the statement from this officer, P.C. Simpson, that Aren said, "Murderers are to be killed, put a bullet in me," that would be classified as an utterance by the defendant that would be allowed in, right? Because it happens in that moment?
Yes, I think so. An excited utterance, certainly under the U.S. legal system, that would be allowed in under that exception to the hearsay rule. It's interesting that he said that. I mean, obviously showing culpability, guilt. Also, he said, "Take me out to the boonies," apparently, like take me out to the countryside and kill me there. They had to explain to the jury what boonies means, because in Scotland, that's not a term they're familiar with, whereas it's a term we understand here in the U.S. and in Canada.
Yeah, it's a pretty devastating comment, to say the least. So let's talk about day three. Okay, so day three of the trial, it shifted focus from the scene itself to what happened after. And Aren Pearson, in the immediate aftermath, what happened, the medical testimony that revealed both his physical and mental state. So Pearson had been admitted to the Gilbert Bain Hospital in Lerwick after being detained in connection with Claire's death. So Dr. Caroline Heggie recounted how the defendant told medical staff that he had stabbed himself in the neck, consumed brake fluid, driven his Porsche off a pier. The hospital team administered an antidote for the brake fluid, performed a CT scan to assess the extent of his neck injuries, and then the doctor told the court something that would linger in the minds of these jurors. Says that Pearson told her, "I've been trying to get rid of her for a while." David, your take on that?
I mean, more just incredibly damaging evidence for him, especially that statement he made at the end that you just mentioned, paints a picture of someone very distraught, trying to kill himself, demonstrates he's comfortable stabbing with a knife. He stabbed himself, he stabbed her. And so, none of it comports with his now defense that she stabbed herself. Why would he feel so guilty and say these things in the hospital and do these things after the incident if he didn't feel guilt?
Yeah, I think it would be tough for the defense to say that statement's being taken out of context in a way. Maybe, hey, I'm just talking about ending the relationship, not ending her life, but when you consider what he's accused of doing, and coming from a medical professional.
Yeah, I think what he said, I read, is he's claiming what he meant was not that he intended to murder her when he said he wanted to get rid of her. He meant that he wanted to send her back to Canada, that the relationship was over, wanted to get rid of her in that way. But like you said, given all the other things he said, it seems more likely the jury would believe that he was saying he intended to kill her.
Day 4, that was the day that drew the jury deeper into this relationship, into the relationship's dynamics. Audio recordings surfaced of conversations between Claire and Aren before her death. And in one chilling exchange, Claire told him, "You are going to kill me." This is moments after saying, "I love you." The 5th day of the trial, October 13th, jurors would hear the most personal account yet. The moment that Pearson had long been expected to describe, and the account that would leave everyone in that courtroom holding their breath. So Pearson took the stand, spoke directly to the jurors. He described February 11th, 2024 as a day that began like any other day. Plans to clean the hot tub, plans to clean the shed at his mother Hazel's property in Sandnes. And the morning was quiet. It was pleasant, but as the afternoon wore on, that's when the tension apparently escalated, according to him. He recounted Claire drinking heavily, quote, about a third of a liter of recently purchased liquor, the arguments that followed. Pearson said she called him a rat after overhearing him speak to her father in Canada about returning her home. And what happened next, Pearson said, was sudden and it was shocking. He described Claire striking him, then grabbing a knife and turning it on herself. And Pearson described trying to move her into his car to take her to the hospital in Lerwick. This is a 45-minute drive, apparently. But the problem, according to him, was she was like, quote, dead weight. And in this chaos, he was struck, he was disoriented, eventually drove his Porsche into the sea. This is his account. He said he swam ashore, returned to his mother's house in shock. He didn't really know what had just transpired. David, does that seem credible to you?
Some of it seems credible and some of it does not. The part about her being the one that stabbed herself does not seem credible to me. It does sound like they were having a normal afternoon. They started drinking. Things started to change. They started to argue. There's a history of arguments between them and fights between them. So all of that sounds right. But the claim that she somehow took action against herself, that she self-injured, doesn't comport with all the other things that he said, both before and after the crime. And so it's hard to believe. It's also hard to know what to make of the fact that he took his Porsche and he drove it into the ocean. Is there evidence in the Porsche he was trying to hide? Is he just trying to end his life and thinks he could drown himself? Is he trying to get rid of his possessions before he kills himself? That's never been explained either, but it's also a very odd part of what he did after this alleged crime.
Look, jurors sometimes want to hear defendants, particularly when you have these kind of unexplainable, these grotesque crimes, these really horrific crimes. What was going on? It does become a question of credibility if they believe him. Because again, one of the odd things is jurors might say, you drove away instead of calling for immediate help. If Claire had truly injured herself, they might say, even if we take your story as true, there could be parts of it that don't add up. But having said that, it's interesting when a defendant takes the stand because it can create an unpredictable aspect. You never know which way jurors are going to go.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The facts are so harsh, and maybe jurors will want to try to find a way to explain it because it's a really depressing, concerning story. And so maybe they will latch on to some of the defenses that he is making. I would also note something very important about the legal system in Scotland is that unlike the UK and the US, it's not just guilty or not guilty. There's a third category in Scotland, which is not proven guilty, which means the jury may think you did the crime, but they don't think there's enough evidence to prove that you did it. And so that's a very interesting part of the legal system in Scotland. Maybe that's what he's going for, is a not proven guilty verdict.
Yeah, David, this is a really dark case. It's a chilling case. Seeing how it's progressing each day of this trial, it's interesting from both the prosecution point of view and the defense's point of view. We'll see which way this shakes out, but just a really, really disturbing one to say the least. David Tafuri, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.